He believed that power could protect the people he loved, but on that quiet Saturday afternoon, destiny chose a shy young woman to teach an entire city what true courage looked like. Grace Kong adjusted the sleeves of her modest beige cardigan as she stepped into the luxury department store, her silver hair neatly tied back and a small handwritten shopping list tucked carefully inside her purse. She smiled politely at everyone she passed, moving slowly through polished marble floors that reflected the warm glow of crystal chandeliers overhead. She wasn't looking for anything extravagant, only a birthday gift for her 8-year-old grandson, something simple that would remind him of the afternoons they spent reading together. Around her, shoppers carried designer bags and spoke in confident voices that echoed through the elegant showroom. Grace never minded feeling out of place. She had spent her entire life believing that kindness mattered more than appearances. As she reached the display of handcrafted music boxes, she gently picked one up, admiring the delicate melody drifting into the air. Before she could ask about the price, a sharply dressed sales associate walked over with an impatient sigh. "Ma'am, those are premium collectibles," the woman said, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at the clearance section." Grace blinked in surprise and quietly placed the music box back where she had found it. "I only wanted to ask a question," she answered softly. The associate folded her arms. "These items are very expensive. We try to avoid unnecessary handling." Several nearby customers glanced over. One man chuckled under his breath. Another woman whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Some people just like pretending they belong." A few nervous laughs spread through the crowd, and the atmosphere shifted from uncomfortable to painfully cruel. Grace lowered her eyes, embarrassed not because of the words themselves, but because strangers had decided who she was before learning a single thing about her. She apologized even though she had done nothing wrong. "I'm sorry if I caused any trouble," she said gently, as she reached for her purse, preparing to leave. That was when another voice quietly interrupted the growing humiliation. "She doesn't owe anyone an apology." Every head turned toward the young woman standing a few feet away. Olivia Carter held a small stack of folded uniforms against her chest, her employee badge clipped neatly to her navy sweater. Her natural curls framed a face that seemed almost too timid for confrontation, and yet her eyes remained steady despite the attention suddenly fixed upon her. She swallowed once before taking a careful step forward. Her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if everyone could hear it, but she remembered something her late mother had told her years ago after witnessing another stranger being mocked in public. The easiest way to lose your character is to stay silent when someone else loses their dignity. Olivia had carried those words every day since. She stopped beside Grace and offered her the warmest smile she could manage. "Ma'am," she said softly, "would you please stand next to me?" Grace looked at the young woman with quiet confusion. "I don't want you getting into trouble because of me." Olivia's fingers tightened around the folded uniforms before she gently shook her head. "Some things matter more than keeping people comfortable." Across the showroom, unnoticed by everyone gathered around the growing scene, a tall man wearing an ordinary charcoal jacket paused beside a display window. His expression revealed nothing as he watched the frightened young employee choose compassion over convenience. No one recognized him. No one realized that every word spoken during the last 2 minutes had already begun changing lives in ways none of them could possibly imagine. The silence that followed Olivia's words felt heavier than the marble beneath everyone's feet. The sales associate stared at her for a long moment before letting out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You are seriously taking her side?" she asked, folding her arms even tighter. "You work here. You should know better than to interfere with customer service." Olivia kept her voice calm, even though her pulse refused to slow. "Respect is part of customer service." A few shoppers exchanged amused glances. One man shook his head. "She's going to lose her job over someone she does not even know." Another woman smiled with quiet sarcasm. "That is sweet, but kindness does not pay rent." Grace gently touched Olivia's arm. "Please," she whispered, "do not do this for me. I can leave." Olivia looked at the older woman and offered another reassuring smile. "If you leave because you choose to leave, that is your decision. But you should never have to leave because someone embarrassed you. The associate's patience disappeared. She reached for her radio clipped to her belt. Store security, I need assistance in the collectibles department. Several heads turned immediately. The surrounding conversations faded as curious shoppers drifted closer, eager to witness the growing confrontation. Olivia suddenly became aware of dozens of unfamiliar eyes studying her. She had always hated being the center of attention. She preferred stocking shelves before sunrise and folding uniforms in quiet back rooms where no one noticed her existence. Standing in front of strangers felt terrifying, but stepping away now felt even worse. Grace lowered her voice. Young lady, what is your name? Olivia Carter. Grace nodded gently. Olivia, you have already done more than enough. Olivia answered with a quiet honesty that surprised even herself. My mother used to tell me that courage usually feels uncomfortable. If it feels easy, it probably is not courage. The words lingered in the air. Even a few people in the crowd stopped smiling. The sales associate pointed toward the entrance. Both of you need to leave before you create a disturbance. Olivia glanced around the showroom. We are standing here peacefully. The disturbance began when someone decided that dignity depended on clothing instead of character. The associate's face tightened with irritation. You are not paid to lecture customers or employees.
No, Olivia replied softly.
I am paid to work. Respecting people is simply how I was raised. Near the front of the department, the tall man in the charcoal jacket remained completely still. His expression never changed, yet his eyes carefully followed every exchange, every nervous glance, every whispered comment from the crowd. He noticed the way Grace instinctively tried to protect the young employee from trouble. He noticed Olivia quietly shifting half a step forward whenever another humiliating remark came toward the elderly woman. Neither of them realized they were being observed so closely. Grace took a slow breath and reached for Olivia's hand. Whatever happens after this, I hope life rewards your kindness. Olivia smiled with quiet uncertainty. Kindness is not something I expect to be rewarded for. At that exact moment, two uniformed security officers appeared from the far hallway and began walking steadily toward the growing crowd while conversations throughout the department faded into an uneasy silence. The two security officers slowed as they approached, exchanging uncertain glances after noticing that the elderly woman was standing quietly while the young employee remained respectfully at her side. There was no shouting, no disorder, only an uncomfortable silence filled with judgment. One officer cleared his throat. Is there a problem here? Before Olivia could answer, the sales associate stepped forward with complete confidence. This employee has interrupted store operations and is creating an unpleasant experience for our guests. Olivia lowered her eyes for a brief moment before speaking with the same steady voice she had used from the beginning. I only asked that this lady be treated with respect. The officer looked from Olivia to Grace, then back again. Grace immediately tried to protect the young woman. Please do not blame her. She was only trying to help me. The sales associate sighed dramatically. You see? She refuses to follow instructions. She is making everything emotional. Several shoppers nodded in agreement, but others no longer looked convinced. One elderly gentleman quietly removed his glasses and frowned as if replaying everything he had just witnessed. A mother holding her young daughter's hand gently whispered, "Watch carefully. This is the kind of moment that teaches children who we really are." The little girl looked up at Olivia with wide eyes. Mom, that lady is being nice. Her innocent observation floated through the crowd, making several people lower their gaze. Olivia could feel every heartbeat echoing inside her chest. She had never imagined that one simple decision would place her in front of dozens of strangers. She thought about leaving. She thought about apologizing, even though she had done nothing wrong. She even imagined calling her younger brother later that evening and pretending everything had gone normally, so he would not worry. But another memory quietly surfaced. She was 14 years old again, sitting beside her mother in a crowded city bus after watching another passenger mock an elderly janitor for his stained work clothes. Olivia had asked why no one had defended him. Her mother had smiled sadly and answered, Because most people wait until kindness is popular. Real character appears before the applause. That sentence had never left her. Back in the department store, Olivia lifted her head once more. I respect this store, she said gently. I respect every customer here. That is exactly why I could not ignore what happened. The first security officer studied her expression carefully. There was no anger in her face, only quiet conviction. Before he could respond, the store manager hurried toward the gathering crowd, his polished shoes clicking sharply across the marble floor. He looked first at the anxious sales associate, then at Olivia, then briefly at Grace without recognizing who she was. What is going on? He demanded. The associate immediately answered, carefully shaping the story in her own favor. This employee challenged staff in front of customers and refused to cooperate. The manager's face hardened as he turned toward Olivia. Is that true? Olivia took a slow breath. If standing beside someone who is being humiliated is considered refusing to cooperate, then yes. The words settled over the department like falling snow. Not one person spoke. Across the showroom, the man in the charcoal jacket finally slipped one hand into his pocket and quietly took out his phone, his calm expression revealing nothing, yet something about the stillness in his eyes suggested that the moment everyone believed they controlled was quietly slipping beyond their reach. The manager folded his arms and looked directly at Olivia, his expression carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to making quick decisions without asking many questions. I am going to make this simple, he said in a measured voice. You can apologize to our staff, return to your assigned duties, and we'll consider this misunderstanding over. Grace immediately stepped forward before Olivia could answer. Please listen to him, she whispered. You have your own life to think about. I am only an old woman shopping for a gift. I cannot let you sacrifice your future because of me. Olivia looked at Grace with genuine warmth. She could see the worry in the older woman's eyes, the quiet guilt that often lives inside people who've spent a lifetime putting others first. She wished she could make that guilt disappear. You are not asking me to sacrifice anything, Olivia replied softly. You are simply reminding me of the kind of person I want to be. The manager exhaled impatiently. Miss Carter, this is your final opportunity. Olivia glanced around the showroom. The polished marble reflected every face watching her. Some people avoided eye contact. Others seemed almost curious to discover how much pressure an ordinary employee could endure before giving in. She thought about the apartment she shared with her younger brother, Marcus. She thought about the overdue utility bill waiting on the kitchen counter. She thought about the extra weekend shifts she had accepted because school supplies and groceries never became less expensive. Losing this job would make every one of those problems harder. For a brief moment, fear wrapped around her like a heavy winter coat. Then another thought quietly replaced it. If she walked away now simply to protect herself, she would remember this day far longer than she would remember any paycheck. She lifted her head and spoke with calm honesty. I cannot apologize for treating someone with dignity. The words were not loud, but they carried through the silent department with surprising strength. A quiet murmur spread through the
crowd.
One shopper slowly nodded. Another folded her shopping bag and stepped a little closer to Grace, as if silently offering support without speaking. The manager's expression became colder. Then I will have no choice except to suspend you while we review your conduct. Grace immediately shook her head. Please do not do that. She has done nothing except show kindness. The decision has already been made, the manager replied. Olivia gently touched Grace's shoulder before the older woman could continue. It is all right, she said with a peaceful smile that somehow carried more confidence than disappointment. Some decisions cost something. That does not automatically make them wrong. Across the department, the tall man in the charcoal jacket quietly lowered the phone he had been holding. His gaze remained fixed on Olivia, not with pity, but with careful respect. For the first time since arriving, the corner of his mouth moved almost imperceptibly, not into a smile, but into the expression of someone who had finally found the answer to a question he had not expected to ask that afternoon. Around him, no one noticed that several well-dressed men had quietly entered the store through different entrances, blending naturally into the crowd without drawing attention. They did not interrupt. They simply waited, their eyes occasionally meeting the man in the charcoal jacket before looking away again. The room felt unchanged, yet something invisible had shifted, as though the balance of the entire afternoon was preparing to turn in a direction that none of the people standing there could possibly predict. The manager gave a brief nod to one of the security officers, signaling that the conversation was over. "Please escort Miss Carter to the employee office while we complete the suspension paperwork," he said with practiced formality. Olivia did not argue. She simply took one slow breath and turned toward Grace, with the same gentle expression she had worn from the beginning. "I am sorry your shopping trip ended like this," she said quietly. Grace's eyes glistened as she reached into her purse and carefully folded the handwritten gift list back into her wallet. "No," she answered softly. "I am sorry that the world still makes kindness so expensive." Those words lingered in the air long after she spoke them. Several people standing nearby shifted uncomfortably. A young couple who had laughed earlier now stared silently at the polished floor. An older cashier watching from another department discreetly wiped away a tear before returning to her register. Even the security officers seemed uncertain, moving more slowly than before as if they sensed they were participating in something that no policy manual had prepared them for. Olivia nodded respectfully and began walking without resistance. She had accepted the possibility of losing her job the moment she chose to stand beside Grace. Surprisingly, that realization no longer frightened her. What frightened her more was imagining herself walking away earlier and pretending she had never seen another human being humiliated. That version of herself would have been far more difficult to live with. Across the department, the tall man in the charcoal jacket continued watching every step. His attention never drifted toward the manager or the sales associate. Instead, he carefully observed how people behaved once they believed the outcome had already been decided. Some looked relieved that the uncomfortable moment was ending. Others quietly regretted their silence. A few finally seemed to understand that dignity could disappear not only through cruel words but also through comfortable indifference. The man slipped his phone back into his pocket without making a single call. He had already seen everything he needed to see. Grace noticed him standing alone near the display window. For just an instant their eyes met. She recognized something familiar in the calm steadiness of his gaze, but before the thought could fully form, he looked away again as though he were simply another customer waiting for the crowd to clear. Grace smiled faintly to herself, unaware that the quiet stranger had been watching over the entire scene from the very beginning. The manager straightened his jacket and addressed the surrounding shoppers with a polished smile. "We appreciate everyone's patience. The matter has been resolved." Yet no one immediately resumed shopping. The music drifting softly through the department suddenly felt distant. The sparkle of crystal displays no longer captured anyone's attention. The expensive surroundings seemed strangely empty compared to the simple courage that had unfolded only moments earlier. Olivia reached the edge of the department beside the security officers when one of them hesitated and spoke almost in a whisper. "For what it is worth, I do not think you are wrong." Olivia smiled gratefully, without slowing her pace. "Thank you," she replied. Sometimes hearing that from one person is enough. Behind them, the man in the charcoal jacket finally took a single deliberate step forward. Around the showroom, several well-dressed individuals who had quietly blended into the crowd subtly adjusted their positions, each movement so natural that almost no one noticed. The balance of the afternoon had quietly shifted, and although the manager still believed he had complete control of the situation, the next few moments would reveal that the most important person in the room had not spoken a single word. The security officers had barely taken another step when a calm voice echoed across the showroom. One moment. It was neither loud nor demanding, yet every conversation stopped almost instantly. The man in the charcoal jacket walked forward with an unhurried confidence that made people instinctively move aside without understanding why. His polished shoes crossed the marble floor in steady rhythm until he stood only a few feet from Grace. She looked up, surprised, as his composed expression softened in a way no one else in the room had yet seen. Without saying another word, he gently adjusted the collar of her cardigan exactly as a devoted son might do for his mother before an important family photograph. His voice became almost tender, Mom, are you all right? The words settled over the department like a sudden winter snowfall. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. The sales associate blinked several times, convinced she had misunderstood. The manager stared silently at Grace, then back at the stranger, waiting for someone to laugh and reveal it had all been a misunderstanding. No one did. Grace reached up and lightly touched the young man's hand. Daniel, she whispered with quiet relief, I did not want to bother you. He offered her a reassuring smile that carried years of affection. You never bother me. Across the showroom, the well-dressed individuals who had blended unnoticed into the crowd immediately straightened their posture. One by one, they walked closer, not with aggression but with unmistakable respect, stopping several feet behind Daniel in complete silence. The atmosphere changed so completely that even the music drifting through the speakers seemed distant. The manager finally forced a nervous smile. Sir, I was not aware that Mrs. Kong was your mother. Daniel slowly turned toward him. His expression remained calm, almost unreadable. That is true, he replied. You were not aware. He paused just long enough for every person listening to feel the weight of those words. But you believed you knew enough to decide how she deserved to be treated. The manager opened his mouth, then quietly closed it again. No explanation seemed adequate anymore. Daniel's eyes moved across the surrounding crowd, not accusingly but thoughtfully, as though he had been studying every reaction from the very beginning. Interesting, he said softly. No one asked her name. No one asked whether she needed help. Many people simply decided her value after looking at her clothes. The silence deepened. Several shoppers lowered their heads. The young mother gently squeezed her daughter's hand while the little girl continued looking at Olivia with quiet admiration. Daniel then turned toward Olivia, who still stood beside the security officers wearing the same humble expression she had carried throughout the entire afternoon. Miss Carter, he said, may I ask you one question? Olivia nodded carefully. Of course. Daniel looked directly into her eyes. Before you knew who my mother was, why did you choose to stand beside her when everyone else found it easier to remain silent? Olivia hesitated for only a moment. Because I believed she deserved respect before I knew anything else about her. Daniel's face remained perfectly composed, yet something in his eyes changed. It was not surprise. It was recognition. Around him, every person in the department sensed that they were witnessing something far greater than an ordinary misunderstanding. They were watching two completely different kinds of strength meet for the first time, and in the stillness that followed, no amount of wealth, reputation, or authority seemed as valuable as the quiet courage of the young woman who had chosen kindness before she knew anyone was watching. Daniel allowed Olivia's answer to linger in the silence before speaking again. There was no applause, no dramatic gesture, only the unmistakable calm of someone who had just confirmed something deeply important. He turned briefly toward Grace, whose eyes reflected both relief and quiet pride. You always told me that character reveals itself when no reward is expected, he said softly. Today someone proved you were right. Grace smiled with gentle warmth. She reminded me of the people your father admired most. The ones who never asked who deserved kindness before offering it. Daniel nodded once before facing the manager and the sales associate again. His expression remained composed, but every word carried unmistakable weight. Before anyone discusses consequences, I would like to understand something. Neither employee answered. When my mother entered this store, did anyone ask whether she needed assistance? Silence. Did anyone introduce themselves? Silence again. Did anyone offer help before making assumptions? The manager slowly lowered his eyes. Daniel did not raise his voice. He simply continued, with quiet clarity. Luxury is not defined by marble floors, crystal lights, or expensive merchandise. Luxury begins with how people are treated when no one believes they are important. Those standing nearby felt the truth of those words settle over the room. Even shoppers who had remained silent throughout the afternoon now seemed uncomfortable with their own hesitation. Daniel looked toward the two security officers. You followed instructions with professionalism. Thank you for remaining respectful.
Both.
Officers nodded appreciatively, relieved that someone had noticed the care they had tried to show despite the difficult situation. Daniel then turned back to Olivia. "Miss Carter, I understand that you were informed you would be suspended." She gave a small nod. "Yes, sir." "Do you regret what you did?" Olivia answered without hesitation. "I regret that Mrs. Kong experienced humiliation. I do not regret standing beside her." A faint smile appeared on Grace's face. Daniel noticed it immediately. "Neither do I," he replied. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed an elegant business card, holding it out toward Olivia. She looked at it but made no move to take it. "Sir, I am not expecting anything." "I know," Daniel answered. "That is precisely why I am offering it." After a brief pause, Olivia accepted the card with both hands. She glanced down and recognized the name at the top. Her eyes widened slightly before she quickly looked back up. Daniel continued in the same calm tone. "Our family supports several educational and community outreach programs. We look for people whose judgment cannot be purchased by convenience or influenced by appearances. Today you demonstrated that quality without realizing anyone was watching." Olivia struggled to find the right words. "I was only trying to do what I believed was right." "Exactly," Daniel said. "Skills can be taught. Integrity cannot." Around them, the atmosphere had completely changed. The shoppers who had once watched with curiosity were now witnessing something far more meaningful than a public disagreement. They were watching respect being returned to the person who had offered it freely in the first place. Grace stepped closer to Olivia and gently held her hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "You protected my dignity before you knew my name. I will never forget that." Olivia's eyes became misty, but her smile remained humble. "I hope someone would have done the same for my mother." For the first time that afternoon, genuine peace settled over the showroom, and every person standing there understood that the greatest measure of a person's worth had never depended on wealth, reputation, or status, but on the quiet choices made when compassion asked for courage instead of comfort. Olivia carefully looked at the business card for another moment before closing her fingers around it. She treated it as though it carried responsibility rather than opportunity. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "But before I accept anything, there is something I need to say." Daniel gave a slight nod, inviting her to continue. "If I receive an opportunity today, I hope it is not because I happen to help your mother. I hope it is because you believe I can earn it." A quiet smile crossed Daniel's face. "That answer is exactly why you deserve the opportunity," he replied. "Favoritism rewards relationships. Character rewards integrity. I never confuse the two." Grace looked proudly at both of them, realizing that the afternoon had become something much larger than an unexpected meeting between strangers. It had become a reminder that values passed from one generation to another could still change lives. Daniel then turned toward the manager, who remained silent with his hands folded in front of him. There was no anger in Daniel's expression, only disappointment. "Everyone makes mistakes," he said calmly. "The question is whether those mistakes become excuses or lessons." The manager swallowed before answering. "You are right. I judged a customer by appearances before offering respect. There is no justification for that." Daniel nodded. Acknowledging the truth is the first step. The sales associate, whose confidence had disappeared entirely, stepped forward with trembling hands. She looked directly at Grace. "Mrs. Kong, I owe you an apology. I spoke to you without kindness, and I assumed things that were never mine to assume. I am deeply sorry." Grace answered with the same gentle grace she had shown throughout the afternoon. "Thank you for saying that. I hope the next person who walks through these doors receives a warmer welcome than I did." The simple response seemed to lift a burden from the room. Daniel looked around at the employees gathered nearby. "This store sells beautiful products," he said. "But every beautiful place eventually becomes ordinary if people stop feeling respected inside it. The greatest service anyone can provide is making another human being feel seen." Several employees quietly nodded. Even those who had never spoken during the incident now understood that they had witnessed a lesson no training seminar could have delivered. The young mother gently knelt beside her daughter. "Do you remember what you saw today?" she asked softly. The little girl smiled. The nicest person was the bravest one. Her mother kissed the top of her head. Never forget that. Daniel then turned back toward Olivia once more. If you choose to accept our offer, you will begin with the same expectations as everyone else. You will work hard, you will be evaluated fairly, and you will earn every responsibility that follows. Olivia smiled with quiet relief. That is exactly what I would want. Grace reached into her purse again and unfolded the small handwritten birthday list. She laughed softly. After everything that happened, I almost forgot why I came here. Olivia looked at the list and smiled. You were searching for a music box. Grace nodded. My grandson loves stories with happy endings. Daniel gently picked up the same handcrafted music box his mother had admired earlier and placed it carefully in her hands. This time no one questioned whether she belonged there. No one looked at her clothes. No one doubted her worth. As the melody filled the showroom once again, the expensive displays seemed less remarkable than the quiet transformation that had taken place among the people standing beneath their lights, because respect had finally become the most valuable thing in the room. Grace held the small music box against her heart as its gentle melody drifted through the department one final time, filling the space with a warmth that had been missing only an hour earlier. Daniel watched his mother smile, and for the first time that afternoon, the tension quietly disappeared from his face. He had spent years building influence, protecting businesses, and solving problems that money could easily reach, yet none of those accomplishments compared to the peace of seeing his mother treated with the dignity she had always given to others. Grace looked at Olivia with eyes full of gratitude. I hope you never change, she said softly. The world will always need people who choose kindness before certainty. Olivia smiled with quiet humility. I think your kindness found me long before I found yours. Daniel gently nodded. That is how character works. It often arrives before recognition does. Around them, employees slowly returned to their responsibilities, but the atmosphere felt different now. Conversations became softer. Greetings became warmer. A young associate hurried to open the door for an elderly couple entering the store. Another employee patiently helped a customer carrying several shopping bags without being asked. The lesson that had unfolded before everyone's eyes spread naturally through simple actions rather than dramatic speeches. The manager quietly approached Daniel one final time. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to learn instead of simply walking away. Daniel answered with calm sincerity. Businesses recover from mistakes. Reputations recover more slowly. Protect yours by making certain no customer ever feels invisible again. The manager nodded with genuine determination. That will happen. Before leaving, Grace walked over to the little girl who had watched everything from her mother's side. She knelt carefully and handed her the music box for just a moment. Would you like to hear it up close? The little girl smiled with delight as the tiny melody played once more. It is beautiful, she whispered. Grace gently closed the lid and placed it back into its gift box. Beautiful things should remind us to become better people. The child's mother thanked her quietly, promising she would never forget the afternoon they had shared. Olivia prepared to leave with Daniel to discuss the opportunity he had offered, but before taking another step, she looked back across the showroom. Only a short time earlier, she had believed she was walking away from her job. Instead, she was leaving with something far more valuable than employment. She was leaving with the certainty that doing the right thing had meaning even when the outcome remained unknown. Daniel opened the front door for his mother, an ordinary gesture that somehow revealed more about his character than any display of influence ever could. Grace stepped outside into the cool afternoon sunlight, carrying the carefully wrapped gift for her grandson. Olivia followed beside them, still holding the business card with both hands as though it represented not success, but responsibility. Behind them, the department store continued its normal rhythm, yet everyone who had witnessed the events of that afternoon knew they would remember them for years to come. Some would remember the embarrassment they wished they had stopped. Others would remember the courage they hoped to imitate. But all of them would remember the quiet young woman who defended a stranger without asking who she was, and the son who reminded an entire room that respect is never reserved for the powerful because true dignity belongs equally to every human being. And on that ordinary Saturday afternoon, beneath crystal lights and polished marble floors, everyone present rediscovered what dignity truly looks like.